Welcome back to the Garden of the Eternal Star. I'm Chris.
I'm Jess, and today we're here to talk about rituals. We'll start by giving you an overview of what a ritual is, how it's used, various safety measures, and how to do your own.
If we start, we can use a broad definition of ritual, and it would be something like a series of words, gestures, and symbolism combined inside a sacred space to convene with the spirits and cause a desired effect.
Rituals take many forms depending on the tradition, the beings that you're working with, and your intent. Just like with magic practice in general, there's no one true way to do a ritual, but there are some generally agreed upon practices that help make them safe and more meaningful.
One important thing to mention here is the reason why rituals have been pinned down, copied, and reused so many times throughout history. This is basically because when a ritual becomes so important to various traditions and it's used over and over and over, it basically has a cumulative effect where the energy and the magic is stored in the rite and the gestures and the words themselves. And so in a sense it's like a snowball effect and they gain power and intent.
Rituals can be used for lots of different purposes. Some use rituals to connect on a deeper level with the spirits, gods, and goddesses that they work with. Others might use them to focus their will or their intent, just like with a spell, to cause a desired result, or really any combination of the two.
When doing a ritual, like any other form of magic, it's a good idea to keep your safety in mind. One general way to do this is to cleanse and consecrate your mind, your body, your spirit, as well as your working space. Some people use sage or dragon's blood incense or even blessed water for this step, but there's a multitude of different ways that you can do it. We use a combination of prayer to Lucy, our matron, and a candle's flame to cleanse our ritual space.
On the physical plane, you always want to remember to practice proper fire and cleanliness safety procedures. When you're using candles, the risk of fire is always present. Make sure that you keep your candles away from flammable materials like blankets or curtains, and keep a fire extinguisher on hand if one's available to you. If not, you can always use a container of water to douse a fire if one breaks out. Candle fires are relatively small and you don't have to worry about big risk of it spreading as long as you're very careful. If you plan on offering blood in a ritual, make sure that you have alcohol, paper towels, band-aids if they're needed, and a sterile spot that you could set all of your tools down on. Chris and I use one of those diabetic pens with disposable lancets to prick our fingers for just small drops of blood when we're offering blood offerings to Lucy. Also, make sure that you never, ever, ever cut anywhere near your veins or across the palm of your hands. You might see that kind of thing in popular fiction books, but here in the real world, physical bodies, if you cut into those places, you can sever nerves and cause the loss of function in your body parts. So always keep that in mind.
Definitely, safety is important. One thing that we will say as far as when you're getting ready to do your ritual, an important aspect before you even do anything else is to begin to plan your intent. Sit down and write out your goal, basically what you want your ritual to be about, what do you intend to gain from it, etc. Once you know what the goal is for your ritual, you'll be able to narrow down the tools and items, incense, and even the beings that you're going to work with, the sigils that are associated with them, all that information. You'll be able to start doing that research ahead of time so that you'll have all the tools and materials that you need when you're ready.
So once you've gone and hit the books and you get a good idea of what your aim is, you can start getting all of the needed materials that Chris mentioned together. Besides candles, sigils, and any other items that you want to include, you'll also need to decide what form that your circle is going to take. Bear in mind that the space that you have to work with, your working area, is going to potentially limit the way that you can draw the circle. Some people tend to use like rope or salt or chalk to lay out an outline for the circle, but if you're limited on space, you really may not have any other option than to just visualize the circle in your mind's eye.
That makes a lot of sense. And I also wanted to mention here, there again, we're giving an example of the way that we approach ritual. There are times when we do ritual and we don't actually cast a circle. It's not a requirement in and of itself. Most practitioners that you speak to, or most books that you read, though, will suggest that you use a circle because it does provide a safe space if done correctly. And if you're doing a spell in your ritual, it will actually help to focus and harness the energy of your spell before you release it. So those are some helpful things to keep in mind. Mm-hmm. So once you've decided how your circle is going to be set up, you can gather, as we said, everything that you might need and put it inside. That's a big thing that we want to mention here. The worst thing that you want is to be in the middle of your ritual and then realize, oh, I forgot my lighter for the candles, or you know, something like that. You want to avoid that, definitely. And another thing that we wanted to mention here is the usefulness of a script. We sometimes will use a script in our rituals, especially if we're trying a new practice or we're going to be working with a deity that we're not accustomed to. We find that it helps us to not stumble over our words, you know, when we're going through the motions of the ritual. And definitely, I would say, for beginners, use a script and don't feel bad about it, you know. Most beginners, when they're trying to forge that habit and that innate nature of doing a ritual, they'll use a script to start with until they get comfortable, quote-unquote, going through the motions.
Right. So you can also use magical texts like the Witch's Bible to draw inspiration from when you're designing your own ritual. Like we mentioned before, there's really no one absolute right way to do it, but when you are using traditional sources, it can help ease you into the practice. Your next step in your circle should be mapping out the cardinal directions and putting a placeholder at each of them.
Another thing to mention here is time. Some rituals that you might do are simple and easy, but if you plan to cast a circle and do something more involved, be mindful of how much time it takes to get everything ready. As we talked about before, the research alone could take a day or two, depending on how new you are to the subject matter and how thorough you want to be with how you approach your ritual.
So when you're finally ready to begin, you can start by double checking that everything that you need is inside the circle. It's important to check and double check and check again before you finally begin. You want your very first step to be casting the circle. You can do that by visualizing a blue flame starting at the north point and move it along the perimeter of your circle. We mentioned earlier drawing up a script to use during the ritual, and you can refer to that in order to continue.
Your script might be very different than ours, but we're going to go through some of the basics here to give you an idea of what it might be like. So for us, in our practice, we start at the northernmost point and we call out to the guardians of the watchtowers. You can think of them as like major powerful spirits of the elements. And as we do this, we're also keeping in mind the other beings that we want to work with, and what elements they're associated with. For example, our matron, Lucy, is associated with air and knowledge. So when we move to that east direction and we call that guardian, after we call the guardian, we call to Lucy. And bear in mind as well, we're lighting our candles as we go from one cardinal point to the other.
So once the guardians are called and each candle is lit at their corresponding points, then we move into ritual prayer, spoken aloud and voicing our intent and gratitude to the spirits and beings that we're working with. This is also the point in the ritual where you would begin any spell or magical working. After that, you can return to the cardinal point connected with the spirits that you're working with and give any offerings or prayers that you intend to give.
Now when all your work is done, you can start at the west, which would be the last point when you began, and working backward, kneel at each of the points, then thank the guardians and spirits for their help, and bid them farewell. When you get all the candles extinguished and you've said farewell to all the spirits and thank them for their assistance, as a final step, you can then stand in the center of your circle, go into prayer, or use whatever method feels right to you, and visualize the flame diminishing that you used when you set your circle. And then go throughout your space and do another cleansing.
That last step, the cleansing of your space, it's really important if you're not already connected to and frequently working with a spirit or being who protects you. Ritual work, it can act as a beacon for entities of all kinds. And cleansing your workspace can be necessary if you only practice on occasion. It's just a general safe practice to use.
That makes sense. So these were some of the basics you might consider when designing your own ritual. You can use them as building blocks to craft something more tailored to your own tastes and style. In our next video, we're going to demonstrate the practices we went over so that you've got a visual aid to go with as well.
And that's all that we have for this video. Thanks for being here with us, guys. We really appreciate everybody who watches. We hope that these tips will help you on your path. Remember to like and subscribe down below so that you can get more content from us. You can also find us on Facebook or at our website with the links that'll be in the description below.
Also, don't forget our coupon code. This one is good for 20% off readings and ritual work on our website. And mentioning our website, we want to let everybody know that we're adding a page with a weekly blog where we're going to be talking about how our practice started and the uniqueness of our individual paths, because her and I had different approaches to magic to begin with, and there's some variation there, as well as other magical topics. So definitely you can check that out as well.
And we had the flickering of the lights.
Which is a good synchronicity.
So we'd love to hear about how you guys craft your own rituals, the techniques and the tools that you use and your experiences with them. Go ahead and leave us a comment below. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. May Lucy's love and light guide you all until then.